Hello and welcome to Just Films and That with me, Josh Hallam.
And me, Alice Oliver. This is the podcast where we talk about films that we think are underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about them.
We're also going to get stuck into some classic films that one of us maybe hasn't seen and maybe throw in some great guests along the way. Would you rather go 10 years forward in time or 10 years back in time?
Ooh, okay. Now, 10 years as myself
Yeah,
in my own life.
Yeah, so
not like back in time to, down in Australia somewhere where someone else was having a great time.
You don't get to pick someone else's life.
Oh, it's just me.
You.
Me 10 years ago.
Yeah, you 10 years ago or you 10 years from now.
Well, I suppose do you get to come back if you go forward? Like you're not just stuck 10 years older?
Yeah. So you can go forward in time by 10 years, check it out, have a little look around, what am I up to, and then come back to 2020.
I think I would probably go back 10 years to kind of reanalyze my life with fresh eyes, with older, wiser eyes.
Never agreed to come on a podcast about underrated films.
Exactly. I'm going to avoid mistakes like this. I think back, but I mean, going into the future is also so tempting. So, yeah, tricky one. You've really flummoxed me there, Josh. What about you?
Well, because I feel like the optimist would say 10 years in the future and the pessimist would say 10 years in the past, because that kind of implies, I would change stuff in a Back to the Future type way.
I must change everything.
I'd put a bet on Leicester to win the league or whatever. But I think, but then 10 years in the future, what if it's shit?
What if it's awful?
What if you're just a complete and utter mess or whatever? Which I might be, but I'm gonna say 10 years. I go 10 years in the past.
Would you as well?
Yeah. So I go 10 years in the past. Yeah.
I'm glad we could agree.
Yeah, we're both incredibly pessimistic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, to the bone.
So this week's film, we'll jump right in, is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992. So big spoiler warning for that. Alice, you picked this one. I'll come to you in a second. Before we start, I am just going to call it Dracula. I'm not calling it Bram Stoker's Dracula.
No, we can't continue, Josh, I'm afraid.
So we mean, it's Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, a.k.a. Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola one, the Anthony Hopkins one, the Winona Ryder one, the Gary Oldman one, the Keanu Reeves one.
Might get confusing.
So you picked this one. So why did you pick it?
Why did I pick it? I think, so I've only seen it once, but it really sort of stayed with me and really made an impression. Not necessarily for all the right reasons, but I'm sure we'll get to that later. And I certainly thought it was worth a revisit. So this is more of a revisit than a necessarily thinking it's underrated or underappreciated.
So not to state the obvious, but it is the story of Dracula, as you probably know from the books. Alice, you've watched this again for the pod. What did you think on second viewing?
So my initial thoughts when I first watched it about some of the performance being a bit off and maybe not so convincing, that still stood. But the second time around, I was very much taken with how it looked. Lots of very dramatic iconography. The film starts with like these crosses smashing and all these like dramatic sort of church scenes. There was, angels. There was Gary Oldman coming in, sort of screaming into the camera, like, ah. So it was a great opening, I thought. What did you think? So
I'd never seen it before. The only thing I knew going into it was a few things. I knew cast, director, and I'd heard two things, one of which was correct and one of which actually turned out to be incorrect. I'd heard that it was kind of a famously bad performance by Keanu Reeves, which is, I think, what a lot of people know. It's almost like when you say it to people, it's like, oh yeah, Keanu Reeves is shit, English accent, basically. The other thing I thought was that it was a failure, like it was a commercial and critical failure. And as we'll come on to, I was very surprised to find out that I was wrong.
Interesting.
So I think what had happened is I'd heard the Keanu Reeves thing and kind of extrapolated it out and gone, that must have been rubbish then.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true. Same as you, having never seen it before, I thought it looked incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the sets were fantastic. It's gothic, like Eastern European castles and all what you think of when you think of gothic. I loved the special effects. A lot of it, I believe, was practical. So stuff like Dracula's shadow moving, the rats going onto the ceiling, the water dripping upwards. A lot of really great point of view camera shots of when Dracula is moving really quickly from place to place. You see his point of view. So overall, I think I was surprised by how good it looked, and it certainly looked expensive.
Oh yeah, certainly. Just like you were saying then with the way it looked, I put brilliant use of fog as one of my notes, because that was brilliant when they were in the horse and carriage coming through the forest and the floor was just thick with fog. I was like, this is so over the top. It's brilliant. The thing that you can really tell with this is that every single scene has been designed like from every single aspect, like every single kind of prop, every single camera angle, everything has been so thoroughly thought out and constructed to create this sort of vibe and to kind of convey the story. So for just every scene, you're getting just like a blast of information, kind of sound-wise and visually. But then, unfortunately, Keanu Reeves opens his mouth, and it is unfortunate. And I am not here. I'm a big fan of Keanu Reeves. We've spoken about this previously. And I'm not here to slate him, and I'm not here to, slag off an actor or whatever, but it's not a good performance, and it really stands out in the film. And one of my notes was, I hate to say it, but I think it would be a better film without Keanu in, which is really sad.
I think you're right. So again, like I've already said, that was the thing I was looking out for. So it's almost like it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy because I'd heard he was rubbish. I was looking for him being rubbish. So I read about it, and he plays Jonathan Harker in the film. But he's not. When you think of the character of Jonathan Harker, he's way too young for a start. I think he himself has said, because we're kind of saying his performance isn't great in it, but he himself has said in retrospect of the film that he wasn't happy with his performance, that he felt like he was exhausted from doing other films, and that he just didn't quite. I think the words he used, or the passage I read, was something like, I was trying to sum up the energy to do it right and do it better, but I didn't have anything more to give.
Wow. Oh, that's sad. At least he sort of recognizes that as well. That's very...
Yeah, and I don't always buy it when actors say, you do hear actors who say, I never regret a performance, I never regret...
I'm great in everything.
Yeah, and you just think, well, if you can't look at your own work in any job and think about stuff you could do better or change, then that's not really sensible, is it? Do you know what I mean? It's not an intelligent way to be. I think what else doesn't help the case for old Keanu is that he's surrounded by an incredible cast.
Yes, indeed.
So if you've not seen it, it's Gary Oldman, it's Anthony Hopkins, it's Winona Ryder, who's obviously also very young as well. What do you think of Gary Oldman's performance?
I think he did a good job. You don't get much of him sort of at the beginning, so you see a snippet of Dracula, pre-Dracula, when he was a man. What was his original name? So
it's Vlad. It's something in the film. It's like Vlad Dracula. Yeah. In real life, he's based on Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
And his name was something like Vlad Dracul Tepes or something, and it means dragon heart or something like that. He was a famously cruel Romanian tyrant. I should have done more research.
No, that's right.
He was a famously cruel tyrant of the time who was also popular in some areas, but that is who Dracula's based on. That's who Bram Stoker based the character on.
Okay, so we had Gary Oldman as his normal human self at the beginning. You get that for a little bit. And then as Dracula, so first of all, he's wearing a fuck ton of makeup. And
All the
he's
way through the film.
he's done up completely, like every single hair follicle, every bit of skin, everything has been touched. And to act well like that is a triumph in itself, I think. I did enjoy Gary Oldman's performance, and interesting to see him so young as well, because one of my first, I first got wind of him, I think Batman, it was that late as Commissioner Gordon. But as Dracula, I do think he had quite a big task in front of him, and I think he did an all right job. Certainly better than I remember as well. Going back to revisit it. Well, what did you think?
So I think this was Gary Oldman's first leading role. Like you say, he is really young in it, but he's not that young. He's not like in his early. He's like early 30s. He's about 34, something like that. I think he's great in it. Mm-hmm. He has a difficult job because what they're trying to do, I think, in the film is get away from the Hammer horror Universal Dracula that's essentially, the Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, the Count from Sesame Street, Dracula,
classic, yeah.
But also pay tribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is this thing of he is kind of quite hammy, and he does have this Eastern European accent, but at the same time he is a whole new type of Dracula that I think at the time hadn't been done before. They make him a man, and they stay away from a lot of the classic tropes, but also pay homage to them at the same time, which we'll come on to. But I thought he was good. He carries the film very well. He's very I love Gary Oldman. I think he's brilliant. He's pretty much he's good in bad things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's. I'd like to know what he himself thinks of it.
Oh yeah, interesting, Gary. If you're listening,
yeah, good job. It's justfilmsandthatpod@gmail.com. Gary, you've not replied to our other messages. So
one of my notes was Gary Oldman, very Johnny Depp in top hat and blue sunglasses. Towards the end when he's trying to seduce.
He does look a lot like Johnny Depp. It's the little beard.
Much. Yeah.
The little beard and the tash. I think I heard, actually, that Johnny Depp was wanted for Harker, but they wanted someone like hotter, like at the time, because Keanu Reeves must have been like post Bill and Ted. Or during Bill and Ted.
Well,
I don't know.
When I saw it, when he come up on the screen, I see his face. I was like, it's just like Bill and Ted. Like, he's still so young, sort of so narrow. I was like, oh, young Keanu.
He's a man that looked great without a beard, then got a beard, and now looks bad without a beard.
When you go back to it, yeah.
But he, no, I think the cast is great. I mean,
Richard E. Grant was in it. Yeah. I forgot. Just see my notes then.
Richard E. Grant plays the Doctor. Carrie Elways, I can never say his name. Carrie Elways from Princess Bride, and Liar Liar plays someone as well. It's a great cast. Mm-hmm. I mean, Winona Ryder's. This must have been again quite at the peak of her kind of. She kind of had that period in the early 90s where she was huge, then didn't do much, and then is big again. But no, I think the cast is great, and unfortunately, because they're so great, particularly Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman, because not only are they great, but they also carry a baggage when you watch it of, particularly Anthony Hopkins, of the legends. Gary Oldman wasn't a legend at the time, but he's become one, so that doesn't lend itself to looking at it from a 2020 point of view with 2020 vision. But Anthony Hopkins obviously was a legend at the time already, had done Silence of the Lambs and all, things, the more classic kind of Attenborough films that he's famous for, Elephant Man and obviously and stuff like that. So that doesn't help the Keanu issue.
I had put, sorry to interrupt, another one of my notes was that Keanu was acting like, you're familiar with Friends? Mm-hmm. Dr. Drake Ramore. So when Joey is acting as Dr. Drake Ramore, it really reminded me of Keanu's performance.
So I'll admit I'd never really seen much of Friends. But but I understand, all my friends have seen Friends.
Yeah.
But I understand the references.
Okay.
It's acting like someone who doesn't really know how to act. It's like they're trying, isn't it?
Mm.
So, however, I'll say this, he wasn't as bad as I thought he was going to be.
Okay. Oh, well, that's
good. So he wasn't good.
No.
But he wasn't like, I thought it would be, geez, I can't watch this.
Yeah.
And he's not good, but he's not, I just don't think he's horrendously bad. His accent isn't amazing. Mm-hmm. I think the main problem is that he is miscast.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that's not a role that Keanu Reeves should have played. I think when you think Jonathan Harker, not that it had to be an English actor, but you think of a kind of tall, well-to-do, skinny English man, almost like a Richard E. Grant.
Well, I was going to say, you've got Richard E. Grant and Anthony Hopkins right there, so that it's not like there was no opportunity there was transnational connections there.
Exactly.
I'm sure he had Francis Ford Coppola had plenty of British actors at his disposal. So I am curious as to why, if he just thought that, like, maybe if he saw Keanu and was just like, he's the guy, he looks perfect, he is how I see it in my mind, or if he just, I'm not sure. I have to look further into that.
I think his casting reeks of, you got to put someone hot in this movie to sell tickets.
And he's hot right now, especially if he was coming off the back of Bill and Ted. It's like, this guy's famous, him.
That's it, isn't it? It's a case of, if you want to do this movie your way, that's fine, but you got to put someone in there to sell tickets then, and Winona Ryder's there. Because her English accent for me isn't amazing.
No,
it's
not great.
Absolutely terrible. I don't know, maybe it's difficult, but there is a litany of films where Americans can't do English accents. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Kevin Costner, he just gives up after 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's
a lot. There's the bad accents in films that is something that bothers me quite a lot, because I just think it takes away from the story that you're seeing instead of adding to it.
You can't concentrate.
Yeah,
you just
if it's thinking, a bad one. Yeah, and you just hear it all the time, and then it becomes distracting. Like, I've got no issue. Like, if Keanu had done an American accent, I'd be like, all right, sound. Like, you just suspend your disbelief. It's like, oh yeah, he's from London, but he sounds like that. Because then after about 5 minutes, you'd forget that, and then like watch a stunning performance where the actor is comfortable and confident in what they're doing. And it's great. But some people can do very good transnational accents, like from English to American. You know Anna Friel?
Brilliant.
Fantastic. She
actress.
does great. She does a great American accent. I didn't even realize. Dan Stevens as well. Brilliant American British. So it can be done.
It's the other way that's the problem, I think. It's US to us that's the problem.
Oh yeah, they were both examples of
like
British
English
people doing an American accent. Okay, so are there any American actors that can do a British accent?
The one that comes to mind for me is Renée Zellweger in Bridget Jones. I think she is good. She does do a good British accent. So
it's certainly not too bad, and it's certainly, like, I definitely didn't come away from that film thinking, oh, that accent was terrible. So
there you go. There you go.
The key is for it to go unnoticed. That's how you know you're nailing it.
That's it, isn't it? Good acting shouldn't look like acting. It should look like you are the thing, I suppose. Yeah. What do you think of what they did with the Dracula mythos? Because Dracula is a character that's obviously been done so many times. It's got baggage. So going into it, what do you think of what they did with it?
It feels like, I suppose, that it would have been, and maybe I'm bigging up Coppola a bit too much, but it would have been Bram Stoker's, like, that's what would have been going on in his head as he wrote it, I think, because it is so massively fantastical, like with the costume and the way that they do the scenes and stuff, and like everyone's hair and the design, and I just feel like it is very fantasy. Like, obviously it's horror, but it reeks of fantasy as well because of the way that it just looks. And I feel like we know, like you say, it's Dracula, isn't it? We know the deal. How many ways can you make that original? And I don't really think it was particularly original, but it was certainly enjoyable.
I agree. I think what it is so going into it, people would have been thinking, Christopher Lee, swept black, slick back hair, crisp white shirt, collar turned up, big cape, or alternatively, like you said, Bela Lugosi, so, the cape over the mouth, the strong Eastern European accent, that kind of thing. And I think they keep some of that. He was Eastern European, so therefore when he spoke English, he can have an Eastern European accent. But I like that they do stuff like, he has about 5 or 6 different forms. So, he's a big wolf creature. He's a big bat creature. He has a kind of old man form that makes him seem more weak. He has another form where it's almost like he's this almost ancient type monster type thing. He does the thing which they don't often do, which is he can turn into stuff. He turns into a pile of rats at one point. He can turn into a kind of beastly dog type creature. So I like that they do that, because all of that, I believe, is in the book. So I like that. I like that but they also pay homage to it by having him do stuff like have the Eastern European accent, have the brides of Dracula, a lot of the stuff is a little bit more subtle. So a big castle on top of a hill, they do that, but it's not, big organ music as it comes on. It's subtle, and that's what I liked. It was a bit hammy and a bit campy, but on purpose. I guess, I don't know, would you agree?
Yeah, certainly. And I think whenever you're sort of evoking images of that kind of time that they're sort of setting it in, it is quite like that, because the characters are always a bit over the top, and especially Dracula, because it is very, it's kind of meant to be sensual, isn't it? Like, even sort of as he looks like an aged monster, there's so much to do with like sex and stuff around vampires, because it's all about, the piercing and stuff. So I noticed Dracula cried quite a few times during this film, which I quite appreciated. I feel like that's not necessarily always a sight. It's certainly not what you would associate with kind of vampires and darkness and evil. But there was a few times where his tears were streaming, and you just really, you feel for the old fella.
I'll tell you something like moving, I suppose, to add to that, I really like that they make him a bloke. Like he is a monster in the film, and he does all the classic Dracula things, sucking blood and killing people and all that. But they give him a backstory, so he is the way he is because he lost his wife, and then he was, she was allegedly cast out of heaven because she took her own life and all that. So I did like that. I agree.
Still quite human, even though grotesque in appearance.
Exactly. So I suppose moving on to things that we didn't like about the film, having watched it again, was there anything that kind of really we've done Keanu's accent, that's done, that's in the back pocket, you've got that, don't need to gamble. have you got anything that you didn't like about the film?
So there were a few technical things that I picked up, so not so much narrative and that. I thought that was all fine and that stood up, but technically there was a few things that bothered me. So there was a moment where a pot of ink spills onto a picture that Jonathan has of Wilhelmina, and then Dracula picks up the picture all covered in ink and then gives it to Jonathan, and he puts it in his pocket, and there's no ink on the flipping picture. And that really, I just really noticed that, and I was like, that didn't make any sense, because you get the perfect shot of the ink falling on the picture, you're then looking at the picture very clearly for some time, so there's no way to miss it, and then it goes in his pocket completely clean. But how would you do it? I mean, don't put it in his pocket. If you don't want the guy to be covered in ink, just don't do it. There was that. And then another thing I noticed, it was when Jonathan, he's kind of creeping around in the crypts and stuff, and he grabs a candle to use as a light. And it's just so clearly like an electronic candle. Like it's lit from the bottom all the way up, even though it's like this thick kind of waxy thing. And it's got like this sort of electric looking flame on the top. But then when it sort of gets to the end of the scene and Keanu goes to put it down, it's a normal candle just with a tiny flame on the top, and he puts it down. And again, I just noticed that. But the reason that was really noticeable is because the light emanating from the candle was leading his way completely, like it was showing him all the way down the crypts. So again, it was very noticeable. It was a prop that was being held in close proximity to the main actors, and where there was long camera shots of it. So I just thought that that's a real shame that that's been allowed to slip that way. I mean, I appreciate it's difficult to try and film anything that looks like candlelight or dim light. I get it. But they were just two really noticeable mistakes. I'm sure there was a few more.
Well, I think what gives the candle away is when he turns it upside down and flicks a little switch on the bottom and goes, "That's it." And, no, I'll tell you one thing I noticed. One thing I noticed was when Mina and Jonathan get married, they both drink.
In the veil.
She drinks through her veil.
Yes.
So like she doesn't lift her veil up, she just lifts the cup to
her lips. I noticed that too.
I know what you mean, but also I do think, look, mistakes happen.
Of course,
but when you spend whatever tens of millions on a production,
do you know how much the budget was? Did you check?
I did check it. It's not, by today's standards, it's not loads. By early 90s, it's something like 50 million.
Okay, yeah.
So
not a fair old wage.
Yeah, so it's not Endgame, but it's not it's not an indie film. So when you're spending that much money, I mean, come on. I think the candlelight thing is not the goof, but the point you're making is interesting, because one problem I had with it was it's just too dark.
Yeah,
and I don't mean the content,
not subject matter. No, it looked dark.
It's like some point stuff is happening, and you're kind of going, "Oh, you can't see."
Yeah,
and I watched this completely in the dark.
Oh, did you?
So like whenever I watch the films for this, if I know it's going to be a dark film, I go and watch it in our spare room. It's the darkest room in our flat. Shut the curtains, I put it on the telly, and make sure it's dark. And even then, with no kind of light pollution either. The only light pollution I had was a little bit of my laptop, which I open and close to make notes as I go. But no, and even then, it was a little dark. So And I get it. You're trying to make it authentic and creepy and gothic
Yeah,
and do it
of
by
course.
candlelight, but I do need to see what's going on.
Yeah, it's a shame if you feel like you are missing some of the stuff that's happening on screen because of it.
Did you think, and this is another point I thought, did you think, particularly the first half of the film, there was some elements that were a little hard to follow? Not because they're dark, like it's not always clear what is happening.
Yes, I do feel that. So some of Jonathan's motivations were kind of not completely clear, I think. And when they're spending the time in the house, kind of some of the things, some of the sort of strings of action don't really seem to marry together. But then I also wonder, well, is it meant to be a bit kind of jarring, and it's all kind of meant to be creepy, and there's like these weird camera angles and stuff, and like you say about the shadows. So I wonder how much of it was just down to you wanting to disorientate your audience. I don't know how familiar you are with Coppola. Like,
I mean, I know, not
classics.
actually not that familiar. I know The Godfather.
Yeah.
And I know he hates superhero films, which is why he doesn't make films anymore, apparently.
Oh, really?
I believe he came out and said since superhero films became the main money maker, he refuses to make films anymore. I mean, he is also in his mid-80s or something, so it's probably that's something to do with it.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know that much about. I know he's kind of obviously a master, and he's up there with he likes your Scorsese's and David Lean's and your Kubrick's for making these amazing films. And that's clear from the way he puts this film together. In terms of the way the story is told, I think there was a lot of elements of cutting between scenes where it wasn't entirely clear what was going on. So like, I think the film really comes into its own, because I did enjoy the film, and it comes into its own for me in the second hour when Anthony Hopkins comes in as Van Helsing. He kind of comes in as this exposition machine, explains and explains everything. And then it really kicks on. But there's particularly first maybe half an hour, I was a bit like, maybe it is because Keanu Reeves' performance is distracting, or maybe it's because it cuts between him and Mina, and sometimes it's him doing a diary and a letter, and sometimes it's her doing a diary and a letter, and there's a lot of voiceover, but also, I mean, it's not that the world is established right from the get-go, because they do the thing of showing you in the 1400s, this is what happened, this is how it's Dracula, bam. But then when it gets into the Victorian times, the late 1800s, it is like, I don't know, I was just a little bit unsure. Like, for example, it took me a little while to figure out who Renfield was.
I literally, another one of my notes, Josh, you're in my head. I think I put, here we go. Who is Mr. Renfield? What is he up to? And Richard E. Grant, ? I haven't caught on to the purpose of their roles yet. So quite deep in, I was like, who are these guys?
And as it goes, as it continues, you realise that Renfield is the guy that was sent there before Jonathan Harker. And that he went mad.
I didn't even pick up on that.
But it's not clear enough.
Yeah.
And
Good,
the thing is that Lucy, who's played by Sadie Frost, has 3 male suitors who all want to marry her. One of them then does. They all appear to continue to be friends.
Yeah.
In this weird, like, 3 guys just trying to get with a girl, but then one of them marries her, and then they're all still mates.
I guess we're sharing.
Like, what's going on there? Like, it's almost like, I think what I've written is that it's kind of trying to tell the story as it was in the book, whilst also paying homage and to pre-existing material.
Whilst also wanting to do his own thing.
Whilst also wants to do his own thing. So I think what happens is you end up with the first half is just a little bit of a mess. It's a little bit inconsistent. It's almost like it overstretches itself. It's almost like he's gone, right, I'm going to do Dracula, and I'll do this, and I'll do this, but I also want to do a little wink and a nod to this. And then when Anthony Hopkins comes in, it's like he comes in and goes, right.
I'm here now, you can calm down.
Here I am, Sir Anthony, Sir Tony. Here's what's actually happening. Don't worry about it, kids. You got me. I mean, I love Anthony Hopkins. I'd pay that man to read me bedtime stories because he's just got the loveliest voice.
It was just such a nice touch as well when he did. And like you say about him being an exposition machine, but it wasn't unenjoyable, and it was great every time he was on screen, and he was a little bit funny, like, because obviously none of the other characters, it's not a comedy in any sense of the word, or it's not supposed to be. Whereas he did bring a bit of comic relief to it, and that's I thought. And that's difficult to do in a film where there is no other existing comedy. And thinking about the comedy in the film, there was one moment, again, that I picked up on. So Richard E. Grant was bringing Wilhelmina, I believe, into a cell. And he just goes, "Don't worry, you'll be safe here." And in the background, you just hear someone going, "Ah!"
Yeah.
Ah, like they're being tortured to death. And that was quite a nice little moment. So I do think there were specks of comedy in it, certainly.
Yeah, it's that kind of dark comedy and violence kind of element to it, isn't it? And you're right, there is elements of like, because the character of Van Helsing, he just talks to people like shit. He talks down to people because he knows a lot more about what he's doing than anybody else. So no, I completely agree with you. But yeah, Anthony Hopkins comes in, and as soon as he comes in, you feel like you're in a safe pair of hands. But until that point, it is a bit of a mess.
Could go one way or the other, you know.
That's my only final point on things I didn't like, and this isn't really, it's not really a fair comparison, but unfortunately, I really love the film What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay.
Which, if you've not seen it, ruins loads of this film.
So I have seen it.
So
I've seen it only recently, really.
Jermaine Clement's character is clearly just Gary Oldman's Dracula, isn't he?
So right,
but even to the bits where like he does stuff like he goes, "See me, see me," and it's like, but Gary Oldman does it. But because I'd seen that first, it's like when you see a spoof before you see the film. So like when you see a scary movie and then you watch Scream or whatever, and it's like, oh god, it's ruined it for me now. Yeah. So there was a little bit of an element of that, I'm afraid.
So has that ruined all vampire?
No,
films,
there was just elements where when he did stuff, I kind of went.
Like, yeah, it's like because then you're thinking about
I was
the
just
other
thinking
film.
about What We Do in the Shadows.
I remember when Jermaine did that.
So we'll move on to the critical reception then, and try and conclude on whether we think this is underrated or not. So, am I right in thinking you haven't seen any of the critical reception in terms of the Rotten Tomatoes, the IMDb, that sort of thing?
Correct. Not a clue.
So, in general, where do you think this stands out of 10?
Okay, out of 10. Let's see. If you're thinking about it in relation to other films, but then also think about the cast and the director, that carries a lot of weight. So, IMDb score.
Or just overall in general?
Maybe less than a 6. So
less than a
maybe
6?
Sort of upper 5s, maybe. Is that a bit harsh?
It is. It actually gets 7.4 on IMDb.
Really?
And
Oh.
it gets 71 from the critics and 79 from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. So it evens out 7.
Oh, well, I'm glad I was wrong, because I do like the film in its own way.
I mean, I couldn't find, in terms of the actual professional critics' reviews, I couldn't really find much that really criticised it. So like Roger Ebert, for example, liked it. He was very much, it's flamboyant, it's feverish, but he enjoyed it. We've got one here that basically says kind of what we've said. It's narratively a bit of a mess. But other than that, I mean, I couldn't really find much. Obviously, the Keanu Reeves thing, which we talked about, hangs over this film. Like, it really does hang over this film, because if you took him out of it, I think you've got a classic on your hands.
Unfortunately, I
that's
feel the same. Yeah,
nothing against Keanu.
Nothing
really.
at all.
Plenty
This is the thing, and you've got to be careful when you're kind of talking about actors in this way as well, because it is a difficult job. You don't know what they're going through behind the scenes.
You don't.
So you want to kind of have that empathy there, but like you say, it felt like such a miscast that it was just kind of doomed from the beginning.
Look, like we've said before, I'm not in the business of slagging off actors' performances. I think most actors have done bad and good performances. That's the way of a job. You have good days, you have bad days.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because he himself has retrospectively said this, I can say he does stick out like a sore thumb in this film. But back to the point, is this underrated based on those scores? Is it overrated? What is it in your eyes?
Ooh, so it feels like that. So that instinctively feels a bit high, sort of. But what do I know, right? But I did enjoy it, and I'm so glad that I watched it again as well. And I am glad that it got that score, because I do think you can tell that so much work has gone into it, and you can definitely appreciate it for that.
I agree. I think it looks amazing. Script's a little bit hammy, but kind of on purpose, a little bit cheesy. Cast is great. Keanu Reeves does bring that down a little bit. Overall, yes, okay, it is narratively a little bit messy in the first half. I'm going to say, I'm agree with you. Slightly based on that, slightly overrated, but I still enjoyed it.
Yes.
Would I watch it again? Maybe, but not soon.
Yes, I feel exactly the same. Maybe in another 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one for overrated. I think that's fair to say, Alice.
I think so. I agree. But only a touch.
A little bit.
Smidgen.
So next week it's my turn to pick. So I have decided we will watch a film from 2007 called Stuart, A Life Backwards. If you do want to watch it before next week, it's a little difficult to get hold of because it is a TV film. We'll talk about why we've picked it next week, but to be honest, the only way you're going to be able to watch it is probably by getting the DVD.
Old school.
Yeah, so old school pick, Stuart Life Backwards. Look out for that next week. We'll be back same time, same place. If you want to tell us what you thought of the film, if you want to suggest a film for us to do, please do get in touch. It's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com or tweet us at films_that. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, filmsandthatpod. Yeah, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Alice Oliver, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Josh. Pleasure as always.
And it's goodbye from me. See you next week. Cheerio.
Bye.